Imagine, if you would, a TCG line developed by Wizards of the Coast that utilizes a mixture of licensed and original properties. These cards from different properties use the same game system and can be played alongside each other. One of the aims of this line is to serve as an on-road to the wider MTG world. Sorry, I didn't mean to get all Rod Sterling there. Anyway, this description applies to today's Universes Beyond, but it also applies to 1998's Arc system. While UB isn't universally accepted, it is undeniably successful. In contrast, Arc failed after only 4 releases over less than a year. In this video, I will explore the history of the Arc system, play and review some of its decks, and compare and contrast it to Universes Beyond. Some of my background on the Arc system comes from Mark Rosewater's Drive to Work podcast episode of the same name, though it contained some errors as Mark was not directly involved in the game's creation or design. That episode and the sources of images not taken by me are linked below. In the podcast episode, Mark describes the system as a really good idea in concept and a flawed idea in execution. He speaks of the system being designed with a two-pronged approach. The first facet was that it was much simpler than Magic in the hopes of being more approachable. The second facet was the use of recognizable IP as a draw. He points out that both of the non-Magic TCGs under the Deckmaster umbrella were adaptations of RPG properties. Many of the later Wizards card games were licenses of a wide variety of properties, such as Star Wars, Pokemon, and Major League Baseball. The thinking for these, and for the Arc system, was that the use of popular brands could attract new players to the daunting TCG genre, and eventually to Magic itself. For Arc, by putting different properties under the same system, friends could play with each other even when they had different interests. The game was designed by Wizards of the Coast's early Magic designers, or Odgard, such as Scaphalius, Jim Lynn, and most notably Richard Garfield. Mark watched from afar while working on Magic. Perhaps the biggest simplification of the game is going from 5 colors to only 3, just red, blue, and green. They don't compare exactly to their Magic counterparts. They also went down to 4 card types: Action, Resource, Character, and Combat. These first 3 card types gave Arc its name, though it was apparently quite difficult for Mark to track down this information when he made the podcast episode in 2015. It's a pretty cool name. Resources were Arc's equivalent to lands, but mana costs worked differently. A mana cost of 6 on a red card meant that you had to tap 6 resources, at least one of which had to be red. There were no double mana requirements or multicolor cards. Characters were the creatures, though they tended to be simpler with fewer static abilities. Non-vanilla characters usually had keyword abilities, enter effects, or attack effects. They also had a combined power and toughness, just called power. The base system had a single evergreen keyword, the defender equivalent of blocker, as all other keyword abilities were limited to a specific game. Additionally, all characters can attack the turn they are played. Actions were usually similar to sorceries. A handful were instant-like, but very specific in when they could be used. Combats were also similar to instants, but could only be used during combat. I'm not sure why they had a card type that was always an instant, and one that was usually a sorcery, but sometimes an instant, as opposed to just having one type for sorcery and one for instant. There were no enchantments/artifacts, and few global effects. There are no equivalents to creature types, but cards can refer to parts of card names in a way that Black Border Magic can't. Additionally, some cards have a tiny symbol designating them good or evil. This has no mechanical significance, but the informational pamphlets suggest trying to build a deck that is only good or only evil, for flavor, I guess. In all honesty, I don't understand the purpose of this element, as these symbols are so inconspicuous that I missed them entirely until I read the pamphlet. They look like copyright or trademark symbols. Bizarrely, tournament play prohibited mixing good and evil cards. There are also legendary creature-esque unique cards. There were 6 steps to a turn. Untap your characters and resources, draw a card, play a resource, play action and or character cards, attack, and end turn. There is no post-combat main phase, and things are done in a more set order than in Magic. Additionally, I don't think you discard any hand size, because that isn't mentioned in the rules information. Another major difference is that there is no life total. Instead, all damage mills that many cards from the recipient's deck. This simplified things by removing a number to track. You merely played until one character ran out of cards. You had 40 card decks, with up to 4 of a non-resource card. There's also a 3-person variant, with the added simplification that you can only attack the person to your left. I went to wizards.com/Xena on the Wayback Machine and did not find the promised suggestions for running a game with more than 3 players. Another beginner-friendly element is the level of explanation in card text. Also, the wording of discard is used for everything. Cards were sold through 12 to 13 card booster packs and pre-constructed decks. Some of the Xena decks were messed up. I do not think Wizards' provided solution was enough, but my window to complain has probably elapsed. Let's talk about the specific sets. One of the great failings of the ARC system is that it was meant to be a big umbrella for many different properties, but only got about 1. But you said they had 4 sets, you might be thinking. But one of those was an original world, and the other 3 were based on Hercules the Legendary Journeys and Hercules the Legendary Journeys spin-off Xena Warrior Princess, respectively. It wasn't exactly the ultimate showdown of Ultimate Destiny. The first game, released in April of 1998, was the one with an original setting. It was called C23, a terrible name that was quite difficult to search for. It had 162 cards. It is most notable for the involvement of famous comic writer and artist Jim Lee. In the 90s, Jim Lee was big in a way that comic book creators simply aren't anymore. C23 is an edgy, post-apocalyptic sci-fi world of battling mutants and cyborg factions. The game launched alongside a comic which sports Lee's name despite not being written or illustrated by him. I read all 8 issues as part of my research for this video. It was not very good. The art was usually alright, but not as good as the card art. It's more muddled and formless, as demonstrated by this laughably bad post-sex scene. The characters are paper thin, and the plot is somehow simultaneously cliché, convoluted, and rushed. Also, it will sometimes straight up forget what has already happened. Yes, it's also weird in context. The comic is also strange as a tie-in because of the disconnect between it and the game. For example, Barrage appears in the name of 4 cards, but I don't think he appears in the comic. In reverse, the Queen is a major comic character, but goes unmentioned in the cards. Another difference is that the card art tends to be aesthetically closer to the modern day than that of the comic. In general, the world building is fundamentally different, and it is difficult to grasp the storyline from the cards alone. Tonally, the cards tend to be much more lighthearted than the grittiness attempted by the comic. C23's unique keywords are Vitality, which means the character returns to your hand after dying, Mobility, which is flying, and Gung-Ho, which means the character attacks each turn if able. An announced expansion set called Uprising was never released. Issue 8 of the comic is presented as the finale, but was clearly not intended as the ending with how much is left unresolved. 1 month later, Xena Warrior Princess came out. I did not choose to watch the combined 301 episodes and movies of that franchise for this video, so I sadly cannot speak to the game's accuracy to their source material. I apologize for this grave lapse in my service to you, my audience. If it makes you feel any better, eBay will forever think that I'm really into these shows. Xena's first set had 180 cards, while its Battlecry expansion, released 4 months later, had 75. The original set's release corresponded with the end of Xena's 3rd season. Xena or Xena? Probably should have looked this up first. Xena was a rating success, so it makes sense as a licensee. Apparently it was quite gay for the time too. The game does appear to stay true to that. As you can see, the sets use screen grabs from the show as opposed to original art. Its only new keyword was Fearsome, which means it can't be blocked by characters with power 3 or less. Battlecry also uses the keyword. Xena seems to be spikier than C23, with more card draw, land destruction, board wipes, cantrips, and discard from hand spells. One of those draw spells has the name of a later magic spell, and the effect and cost of an earlier one, which I think is funny. Battlecry added the slow keyword, which means the character can't attack the turn it is played. Yes, the only new mechanic is a downside. Finally, these sets can only be described as notably horny. In July of that year, the Hercules the Legendary Journeys set came out. I think it's weird that the spin-off got a set first. but I have been told that it is better than the original. Hercules was also popular at the time, making it an understandable choice for a license. The set came out between seasons 4 and 5 of the show. It also had 180 cards. Some are reprints from the Xena game. There are no new keywords, but limited activated abilities show up for the first time. There's also a new symbol for cards that return from the discard pile to your hand each turn. Also, it's at least as horny as the Xena sets. In September of 1998, the previously mentioned Battlecry expansion came out. And that was it for the Arc system. Oh, also, Wikipedia claims that there was an Arc System World Champion in 1999, but there's no source, and I wasn't able to verify it elsewhere. The only other thing that came up was an Essential Oil website that for some reason had metadata from the aforementioned Wikipedia article. I don't understand the internet. According to the Wizards website, I unfortunately just missed the Pro Tour by being born several months later. Because this was an unpopular system that failed, you can pick them up for quite cheap, which means I was able to acquire a precon from each of the 3 games. To begin, let's unbox them. As you can see, my red-green C23 Firestorm deck has its original wrapper, which has kept the box and cards in pristine condition. It is difficult to open this one-handed, but I simply cannot be bothered to set up a camera holder. Each deck contains 40 cards and 2 pamphlets with rules, details on the property, and additional information. Here is my blue-red Xena Tools of the Trade deck, which actually is in pristine condition. Something I noticed is that the Arc Systems logo is pretty small, and the box does not describe the cross-game compatibility anywhere. You have to read through half of one of the pamphlets before you'd learn what Arc actually is. Finally, here's my blue-green Hercules the Infiltrator deck. Luckily, the cheapest available decks of each respective property ended up being one of each color combination. You can see that they finally mention what the Arc system actually is on the box. On the other hand, you also notice that the different sets have unique card backs despite being compatible with each other. My first games were with a non-Magic player who I've attempted to teach Magic before, with the Xena and C23 decks. They actually preferred Arc, finding the rules easier to grasp. I found our games pretty dull. Arc is very on rails. There are few decisions to make and little you can do in response to the other player's actions. The C23 deck seemed much stronger with a better curve. Additionally, since there is no reach equivalent, and only C23 has the flying equivalent, the mobility cards are just unblockable against decks of the other games. At the same time, the decks didn't have much of a defined mechanical identity. Later, I played with experienced TCG/Magic players, including the 3-player mode with all 3 decks. The games were again very on rails. The vitality characters and recurring spells also led to repetition of gameplay. One of the players described the milling damage system as having merit, but not being well executed. I would agree. Firstly, it doesn't really remove a number to track, it just makes the number you're tracking less convenient, as I often found the exact number of cards remaining in each deck to be important. Additionally, in some ways, the deck as life system requires more thought, not less, because the damage every card draw spell causes must be carefully weighed. Life as a resource is a thing in Magic, of course, but it feels more purposeful there. As I said at the beginning, my thesis for this video is that the Arc system had similar goals to Universes Beyond. In the UB announcement, Wizards writes of its goal that UB will bring the game that we love to more people who might not have otherwise found us. We hope fans of these worlds and characters will find our game through Universes Beyond, and we hope they'll stay a while and become a part of our amazing community. The same thinking behind the Arc system. But what went wrong there that hasn't for UB? I think it's a number of things. Firstly, the Arc system just isn't a very appealing game system, especially to players who are already familiar with Magic. Any new system is going to have trouble getting off of the ground, even when it's attached to an established game company or popular property. I'm reminded of an asker on Blogatog who argued against UB because it robbed the properties of having their own dedicated games. Many commenters pointed out that most of the UB properties already tried their own card games without success. If we made the UB sets identical in terms of card design, but not mechanically compatible with in-universe Black Border Magic cards, the audience would diminish greatly. Familiarity with the system and compatibility with older cards are powerful draws. With Arc specifically, it was also clunkier, less varied, and ultimately duller than Magic, in a way that can't be said about UB. Even if you disagree with UB's existence, the actual sets have been generally well designed. I have no familiarity with Warhammer 40k and wasn't very familiar with Fallout at the time, but I've enjoyed playing with and against their commander decks. I just don't see many non-fans of the respective Arc properties interacting with those sets the way they might with UB. Relatedly, the issue of just how simple to make beginner Magic products is a tricky one. The Portal sets, Core sets, Welcome decks, and Planeswalker decks are some, but not all, of Wizards' attempts at simplified Magic to rocky results. Here's hoping Foundations is a success. Sometimes you strip so much away in an attempt to become beginner-friendly that the beginners never get hooked in the first place. I think that may have happened with Arc. There is an argument that UB is too complicated for all the new players it attracts, but it's clearly more successful in that regard than Arc was. Another simplification mistake that Arc made was its approach to mechanics and keywords. Magic benefits greatly from having evergreen mechanics and effects. Siloing them off made Arc worse. For pre-existing Magic players, it would have been boring to have one of a set's big exciting mechanics be something exceptionally common in Magic, like flying. To say nothing of Battlecry, which only had a new downside mechanic, and Hercules, which had no new name mechanics at all. With Magic, 1999's Mercadian Masks taught the designers the importance of naming mechanics. When they don't, players won't pick up on them and will feel disappointed. Relegating keywords like flying to a single set also unbalances sets that are supposed to be played against each other. Mark also argues that Arc's simplified and hazier color pie made the game worse, and milling as opposed to life totals made the game psychologically less enjoyable to new players. From my Arc games, I agree that the colors, and also the precons, lack distinction, and that the milling system is worse than Magic's life totals. Finally, Wizards undermined the Arc system by barely using it as an advertising feature and giving each set a unique card back. The other side of things with Arc and UB is their approach to their properties. I actually disagree with Mark's opinion that Hercules and Xena weren't a relevant property at the time, but I do agree that having 3 out of 4 releases in what was supposed to be a multi-property spanning system be from the same franchise was a mistake. If the point was to give friends from different fandoms a single game to play together, you have to have actual variety in your licenses. And while Jim Lee was big at the time, he probably wasn't so big that just his name was enough to sell people on a card game with a generic setting tying into a bad comic. With UB, Wizards has done a much better job working with more varied properties with strong audiences. UB also has the advantage of modern-day top-down design tools for more interesting and representative adaptation. In contrast, Arc has a lot of bland and generic cards. I also find UB's original art to come across as being of a higher production value than Arc's often blurry or weirdly colored screenshots. Mark also speaks of Wizards having a more primitive distribution system for casual players in 1998 that Arc was a victim of. Finally, I want to take a moment to say where I stand on the base idea of mixing and matching IP. I don't think it's a particularly modern or inherently flawed idea. For as long as humans have been telling different stories, we've been drawn to the idea of the crossover. I like this guy, and I like this guy. So what if they teamed up? Or fought? Or kissed? Speaking of Hercules, look at the mythological Argonauts, who were basically the ancient Greek Avengers. Everybody who was anybody eventually got added to the roster over the centuries. Arc and UB aren't even the only crossover card game systems. In the failed category, we have Quick Strike and Epic Battles, and in the successful and ongoing category, we have Universal Fighting System and Web Swords. And for every Fortnite type crossover made with less source material care, you have a Super Smash Bros. Made with exquisite attention and appreciation for the characters. Also, Fortnite is still fun. I admit that I was initially pretty conflicted about UB. It was a big change, and change is unsettling. But my feelings shifted for a number of reasons. Firstly, I've liked every UB set that I've interacted with. As stated, I enjoyed the sets from properties I don't care about, but I really enjoyed the sets based on properties that I do like. Lord of the Rings and Doctor Who are fun, well-made sets in a vacuum, but it is also abundantly clear that they were crafted by people with a great deal of appreciation for the source material. I can't read accounts from their designers and think these sets are only cash grabs. I've met so many players who were first attracted or brought back to Magic because of a UB set for a property that they loved, and almost all of them made an excited jump to in-universe Magic. I love the Magic world. I hope this channel is a testament to that. You don't make a parody song naming 100 Magic locations with accompanying LEGO recreations if you don't love this world. I want it to keep going and expanding. I want it to get more resources than it does now. I don't want it to canonically cross over with other properties, and there are specific UB decisions that I disagree with. But I'm not going to not be happy that friends and family members are playing my favorite game because of Universes Beyond. I think it is a net positive for Magic the way that the ARC system never could be. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this and want to support me, the best thing you can do for the algorithm is immediately watch another one of my videos. If you like Wizards of the Coast failure history, may I suggest my video on Magic's messy movie and TV show attempts. I hope you found this niche topic as interesting as I did. Have you played with ARC or any of the other crossover card systems? Are you a Xenoverse fan who can comment on the accuracy of these card adaptations? Did I commit heresy in your eyes by complimenting UB? Please share any thoughts you have below. As always, thank you to my patrons. If you want to join them, that is linked below. Bye!